Alright, these are going to be your Unit 1, Lesson 1 notes on conditional statements. So you can go ahead and put this down on your paper and start writing. Alright, so, well, what are conditional statements? They are if-then statements. Basically, if something, then something else. Okay? So the symbol for a conditional statement is P arrow Q. And what that means is, when you read that, it says, if P, then Q. So that's what those symbols mean, or the P arrow Q. Okay? Now, a conditional statement can be true or false. So it can be a true statement, or it can be a false statement. So, for example, if it's cloudy outside, then it's going to rain. That is an example of a conditional statement. Okay? So now there are parts of a conditional statement. The first part is Alright, so the first part of a conditional statement is what we call the hypothesis, which follows the word if. And the symbol for the hypothesis is P. And if we look at our example, it is it's cloudy outside. So it's what follows if, but it doesn't include the if. Okay? And then the second part of a conditional statement is the conclusion. And that's what follows the word then. Okay, so then the symbol for conclusion is Q. And as you can see in the example, it is going to rain is the conclusion. Okay? It does not include then. It is what follows then. Okay? And so that's where the symbols for a conditional statement being P, then Q comes from. Because these are the symbols P and then the symbol Q. Okay? So then there are ways to go around and kind of switch around a conditional statement. And there's 3 different ways we're going to talk about switching them around. So the first one is called the converse. And that's when you just switch the order of the hypothesis and the conclusion. And the symbol for converse is Q then P. So if Q then P, which should make sense. If I'm just switching them, I'm going from P to Q to Q to P. Okay? And then the next one we're going to talk about, another way to alter a conditional statement, would be the inverse. And the inverse means to negate the hypothesis and conclusion. So when I say negate, what I'm saying is to make it not or the opposite. Okay? And so here is the symbol that means not or the opposite. So in this one, I haven't switched the order of the original conditional statement. I'm just negating both pieces. So the symbols for inverse looks like not P, then not Q. Okay, so it has that little symbol out front. And then your next one, the last one we're going to talk about switching, is called the contrapositive. Now, I remember this one because contrapositive is a longer word than converse and inverse. And so, therefore, it's got to do 2 things. Now you got to switch and negate the hypothesis and conclusion. So basically, you're going to do what the converse was, and then you're going to negate it. And then the symbols for contrapositive would be not Q and not P. So just as long as you can identify the original hypothesis and conclusion, then you should be able to switch it around to form the converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So we're just going to do some examples on how to practice this out. So our example, our conditional statement is going to be if an animal is a bear, then it is a bear. So if it's a bear, then it's a mammal. So don't be confused. Here when we're talking about if it's an animal, then that it is talking about the animal. Okay? So I could have also said if an animal is a bear, then the animal is a mammal. Okay? So don't be confused by that. Okay? So our first thing we want to do, let's identify the hypothesis. Remember the hypothesis, we represent with the letter P, and it's what follows the if statement. So it would be here, okay? An animal is a bear. And then if we want the conclusion is represented with the letter Q, and it follows the then statement. So it is a mammal, okay? And that would be the conclusion. So now if we had to do the converse, we need to make sure we can do that. Now we want to take the hypothesis and the conclusion and switch the order. And so we said if an animal is a mammal, then it is a bear. Remember that it and animal are interchangeable. Okay? So if it is an animal, if it is the animal is a mammal, then it is a bear. And that's how we switch it. And so remember that's the Q then P. The inverse of this statement means we keep it in the same order, but we just have to negate everything. So our inverse is going to say, if an animal is not a bear, then it is not a mammal. So remember your negation has the not, or it's the opposite of whatever it was. And then the last one is your contrapositive. Your contrapositive, remember that's the longer word, so now we got to do two things. We have to switch and we have to negate it. So we're going to switch the hypothesis and conclusion, and then we're going to negate that statement. So we have, if an animal is not a mammal, then it is not a mammal. Okay. So those are your converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So here we are, we still have our examples, our hypothesis, converse, contrapositive. I want to introduce to you, because remember we said the conditional statements can be true or false. So how do we read these statements and determine if they are indeed true or false? So we have what is called the counterexample. And that's an example that disproves the statement. So if you have at least one counterexample, then that would make your whole statement false. If you can't come up with a counterexample, that means it's a true statement. Okay? So we're just going to go up. First, we're going to look at our conditional, and we're going to determine if that's a true or false statement. So our conditional was, if an animal is a bear, then it is a mammal. Okay? So the first part, we're always going to assume is true. So if an animal is a bear, it is always a mammal. There is no example of a bear that is not a mammal. So that would make this a true statement. Okay? So if it's true, you cannot find a counterexample. Alright, so now let's go look at the converse, and then we're going to determine if that's true or false. The converse says, if an animal is a mammal, then it is a bear. So we think of something that's a mammal. If it's a mammal, does it always have to be a bear? No, it doesn't have to be. So that's false. And we know that because a counterexample could be dog. Because if it's a mammal, it could be a dog. A dog is a mammal. Okay? It doesn't necessarily have to be a bear. So dog would be an example of a counterexample for that statement. Inverse. Let's determine if that's true or false. If an animal is not a bear, then it is not a mammal. So I want you to take a few seconds to determine if that's true or false. And if it's false, then you can come up with a counterexample. Alright, so if an animal is not a bear, then it is not a mammal. So it's saying if something is not a bear, pick any animal, some animal that is not a bear, doesn't necessarily mean it's not a mammal. Again, that's going to be a false statement because a dog is not a bear, but a dog is a mammal. Okay? therefore, and you don't have to have a dog. You can have a cat. You can have any other mammal, a whale. Okay, so any of that can work. All right, so read through the contrapositive and then determine if that is true or false. All right, so if an animal is not a mammal, then it is not a bear. Okay, so if we know that said animal is not a mammal, then there is no way that that can be a bear, right? Because a bear is a mammal. So if it's not a mammal, then it's clearly not a bear, and that's a true statement. Okay. All right, so that's the end of your conditional statement.